Mike McCool here in the Royal Examiner Studios. With me today is Jeremy Camp, the Director of Zoning and Planning, and Joe Petty, the Zoning Administrator for the County of Warren. I should have said Town of Front Royal, County of Warren. So we got the big guns with us today in the studio. What we're going to talk about is political signs, and it could be signs in general, but really I think the program now is about, we're seeing them everywhere throughout the county and the town, and signs everywhere, and people are saying, we're growing these things. They must plant them and they grow overnight. So we want to kind of talk about is, how long is this going to last? And are they according to code? They're not according to code. How big can they be? Where can we put them? Et cetera, et cetera. So who wants to start? Let's start with the county, since they can prize a little larger area, and but I think there's more signs in town.
Yeah,
but
maybe. Yeah.
Let's talk about things in general. What's the county's position on these signs?
So the county's position on these signs is we look at all temporary signs as the same, as we can't regulate signs based on their content. So anything on private property, it has to be in residential districts 8 square feet, and then all other zones it can be 32 square feet. And these are temporary signs, like I said, regardless of their content.
Like yard sale signs and things that people...
And they would have to be on private property. And as the county, even though the town is within the county, we do not regulate signs within the town of Front Royal limits or in VDOT right-of-way. VDOT also has their own set of regulations within their zone. So,
and VDOT sent out a letter to a lot of the candidates giving them their do's and don'ts.
And we sent out a memo yesterday to candidates just reminding them of the size, and then recommending that they have them picked up after the November election within 15 days. It gives them a good 2 weekends to get out throughout the county and get those signs.
I got a call the other day. I ran for Commissioner of Revenue 4 years ago, and someone said, I still see one of your signs way out there on 619 somewhere. So they do have a tendency to stick around, and you forget where you put them. So.
The county is quite large, so you can forget where they're at, where you may have placed them, and that's why we've kind of given those 15 days allows you to ride around and check out the nice county and see where you find them.
Sure. What about in the town, Jeremy?
Well, in some ways it's similar, in some ways it's different. We still have that 8 square foot. That's our maximum size we allow for political signs. Other temporary signs, it depends on what you're doing. But the main focus of the conversation today is political signs, so it's 8 square feet. The maximum height is 6 feet. And the thing we have the most problem with is people putting it inside of the public right-of-way because they don't know where that line is. And so we have a code enforcement officer. He's regularly picking up signs that are put inside of the right-of-way. A good rule of thumb is put it on the back of the sidewalk. And if there's not a sidewalk, imagine that there is a sidewalk and then put it back that far.
Yeah, I think someone always imagine 5 feet behind the curb is a pretty well safe rule of thumb. I remember I talking to the VDOT code enforcer, and he was saying, well, just look at the utility line. If you see the telephone poles, if it's behind that, we probably won't bother you. Well, sometimes that's 100 feet from the road.
Right.
And other times it's, 2 feet from the road. But he said as a rule of thumb, and it's kind of like the sidewalk. I think it's the same way.
Yeah, and you mentioned content. You're right. Zoning can't regulate the content of the sign, just the type. So political signs have to meet certain rules. The state code says that localities can establish their own reasonable regulations on political signs, and a lot of them have very similar regulations.
Well, years ago we had, I keep saying this, people say it, and I think you say, it's not in the code book now, but we had a ordinance on on political signs. 45 days before the election you could put them up, and we've had signs up for over a year. So is that still on the books, or?
Well, our code specifically says you have to remove the signs 5 days after the election.
Okay.
It doesn't say there's not a time limitation before.
Okay.
But after the election, you got to remove them, by that 5 days. And as far as content too, I should point out that the state code does have regulations that the localities don't enforce regarding the content. It's 24.2-956 of the Virginia Code, and so these are more campaign election requirements on how they have to put certain things in the
Right,
advertisement.
right. Paid for by the candidate. There's always,
Exactly.
there's always things like that. But I do know that people put things on telephone poles and people's fences and.
Yard sale signs we're regularly picking up. You can get approval for a temporary sign in the right of way that you would come into the town manager's office. Those are usually approved for things
I
like,
see a lot of
like
events. Yeah, like the festivals and things.
So
Well, tell me about. I know there is a little loophole in this signage thing about banners versus yard signs. Isn't there something? Banners can be larger and can be up for a period of time.
if well, you can put up a banner on the property of where the event's going.
Okay.
There's two different type of banners. First of all, there's like a private banner. So you have a store and you want to have a sale, so you put a banner up, and so that's allowed, and you can have it up for 14 days without a permit. Political signs also, you don't need a permit,
Right.
as long as you're in compliance. If you want to have that banner up for longer than 14 days, you come in and get a temporary permit. It's really easy, and we can allow it for up to 90 days in the calendar year. Then there's the big banners that the town puts over the street,
Right.
and so that runs through the town manager's office, and so that's you have to meet certain design specifications to meet the wind load.
Sure.
So
Well, let's talk about sign tricks, and I say that tongue in cheek here, but there's we have this 8 square foot rule. So I've seen people chop their signs up, and then to try to keep them under the 4 or 8 square feet rule, they got a 60-foot sign, but they're in pieces. How does that fly? Is that everybody says, "Oh, that's how we make it work"? But is there any legitimacy to that?
Well, everybody measures signs, I think, a little bit differently. We don't regulate the amount of signs.
Uh-huh.
It is the square footage, so you would probably look at those
If
little
I put them all
differently.
together, they would be one big sign. Was that?
If you would have to, again, no, you're not reading the
You're not going to
content.
go on the record here.
Yeah, not reading the content
That's
of
right.
it. So you would kind of probably look at it maybe a little more holistically. It'd probably be more case by case. Just making sure it's not in the right of way or
Okay.
against any other ordinances. So.
Were you going to chime in?
I'm
on
not
this?
sure. I was hoping I could debate Joe on this, but I'm not sure how to answer that one. But I guess the same way. But I would just make it a little more clear that we don't regulate in the town the number of political signs, but if someone's going to put them two together, where they're effectively one sign. So you look at it, and common sense tells you that it's
'Cause then you're
one
measuring-
sign with a little inch gap or
Yeah.
something. Then I'm going to treat it as one sign. But if they're two independent signs, yeah, you can do that.
All right.
No, there's nothing that says you can't. So
They don't want to go on the record. I mean,
that's there's a lot of variation potential to that. So you have to look at each one. But obviously, if someone's purposely trying to circumvent the code by doing that and just separating them a little bit, it's anybody who's going to reasonably look at it as one sign.
well, how about here's another thing that you see people. I think in general, people try to comply to the code. I mean, let's just be honest.
99.9%.
99% of that. And one way they comply is putting their big signs on mobile vehicles. How's that work? I mean, on trailers and parking them, moving them, and driving them around. I know as I was in Las Vegas, they got huge billboards that drive behind trucks, and all they do is just drive around town. So I'm just assuming, and I've seen trailers here in town with 4x8 signs on them. What do you think of that?
And I don't think in the county, I haven't seen that much in the county. We don't have anything that specifically, gets to that extent. I've seen some of that driving around town.
We always got to get that town plugged, don't we?
But, obviously it would be in the case where you would probably reach out to them, and by the time you've reached out to them, the truck is gone.
Right.
And how do you continue to follow? It's just
Called due process, right?
It'd be a challenge to, get in contact with them. But again, I think it would just fall under all the other, if it's being parked somewhere and such.
So that there's no bending that. What do you say, Jeremy? How's that look? How do you consider something?
Well, the
on a
town
trailer?
allows for you to have advertisement on your vehicles.
Right.
In that respect, it's typically not a problem. If someone's got an abandoned vehicle that's not being used, it's just purposely sitting there as a sign.
Yeah, that might be
But
something.
it's going to be treated as a sign. But if it's a vehicle in operation and they're just
Operable,
parking it there and
licensed
it's
and
advertising the business, by code, there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that.
Right. What's the First Amendment have to do with political signs? Is there any, people say, well, that's my First Amendment right to put this sign on my property. You can't tell me how big it can be.
For us, it means that we can't tell you can't have a political sign. We just can only set up reasonable regulations for those signs, and that's not a First Amendment violation
Okay.
Yeah.
by requiring it to be no
Or
more
8
than
square
8 square feet.
Exactly.
That's just-
We're not prohibiting the signs from being there. We're just
Or what's on them.
reasonable
or what's
recommendations.
on them. We don't regulate the
Yeah,
content.
exactly.
So the state does, but we don't. Yeah.
Right. What's interesting, I do know, like I say, there's a lot of questions about sign. Is there any rumblings about in putting different codes out there to maybe put dates on things on future signs or future elections? Every election we talk about signs, and then they say, "Oh, there's so many, there's so often, they're a pain, they're distracting," and then the election's over and no one talks about them for another 2 years.
Exactly. Yeah. You're right. That's
But
the
so
way it
this
goes.
code of 45 days, I swear it was in the code book 30 years ago, but no one can seem to find it. So
I know that the county is looking at amending our code, not in regards to temporary political signs, but just signage in general, because since the code was written, signage has changed and
Right,
the way
right.
people want to get that media out. And also with state legislature coming through, we want to make sure we're current with that. So with any zoning code, we're always looking at it, and we have been discussing, just revising the signage ordinance to make sure it's meeting any state, federal regulations.
well, if you go out west, which seems to be sometimes the sign ordinance, I mean, they have drastically changed. I mean, back here on the East Coast, you see, huge signs, 60, 100 feet in the air. You go out west and towns of, even McDonald's in Sedona, Arizona is not golden arches. They're turquoise. So, I mean, they have regulated trade, brands into signage. And the signs sometimes are no more than 2 or 3 feet off the ground. And very small, and you see that in a lot of the new communities, that these master plan communities that are being built. So I'm sure that the zoning, as you guys go to these zoning seminars, I'm sure you start seeing these changes in communities throughout the country, where signage is always. Even Las Vegas, I mean, that's like the sign capital of the world. They're scaling back signage. Like we have sign pollution. I'm
We
wondering
do.
sometimes.
One of the legal challenges with that is it takes time to kind of make change. Even when you make the ordinance, the zoning regulations really take a long time to kind of come into effect because everybody's grandfathered.
Yeah.
When we pass the zoning ordinance, all the existing stuff becomes grandfathered,
Yeah,
and it only applies to the new stuff. So it does happen, but it's a slow process. As new things come.
I think people, and that kind of brings up new things, other things than signs, but zoning in general. People, well, look at this community. They have this, this, and that. I say the difference between it is they have zoning longer. They've had zoning for 100 years. We've only had zoning for 50 years. I mean, it does. It takes a lot of time to see these change, and they've gradually. I've seen it over the 40 years I've been in Front Royal, Warren County, so I've seen it. Well, look, guys, I really appreciate you coming in. Let's talk about these signs. Anything else you want to add to about signs before?
If anybody has any questions, they can contact us at the planning department. We're located at the Warren County Government Center. We're there all week, and we'll be happy to answer anybody's questions they may have, whether it's signs or any other zoning or planning questions.
Yeah, if you want to, same with the town, actually we'll go an extra leg than the county will. And,
Oh, sure, yeah.
and whatever you need, we'll have an open door and you can come to us and we'll help you out.
Yeah, you're easier to get to than they are.
Are we?
Well, yeah, because you're right inside the door. I mean,
Oh, yes.
I got to park a mile away and walk into the county.
We have a bigger office.
You have a bigger
Yeah.
office. Well, I do
Board
appreciate you guys coming in and talking to us. Anytime you're welcome to come. Anytime there's something, a message we want to get out to our viewers, it's greatly appreciated. Again, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.